All right, good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? Excellent, it's great to be here with you. My name is Adam Ludwin, and I am the co-founder and CEO of a blockchain technology company called Chain. And before I explain what I am doing up here, let me introduce you to my esteemed co-panelists. To my left, Vanessa Colella is the head of Citi Ventures and the Chief Innovation Officer at Citi. Morgan McKenney is Citi's head of core cash management for Asia Pacific in Citi's Treasury and Trade Solutions business. To her right, from NASDAQ, Brad Peterson, the CTO and CIO of NASDAQ. And at the end, Nelson Griggs, who's the head of global listings for NASDAQ. Now, the reason we are all up here today together is to share a very special joint announcement. And by the way, it was covered just moments ago in the Wall Street Journal, but no reason to look at your phone. We're going to explain it to you.
Hopefully.
Today, NASDAQ and Citi are announcing a new institutional banking solution that tightly integrates their two businesses using blockchain technology. That's right.
All right.
Thank you. To be super clear, this is not a preview or an announcement of something that will come later. This is live today in production. This means that, specifically, corporate clients on the NASDAQ private markets will have a seamless payments experience that's powered by Citi's Treasury and Trade Solutions business. To enable that, Citi launched a new service today. It's called Citi Connect for Blockchain, and it's a connectivity platform that integrates blockchain networks with Citi's financial infrastructure, beginning today with the NASDAQ Link blockchain platform. And that comes back to why I am up here today. So I am also delighted to share that it is Chain's enterprise blockchain platform, known as Chain Core, that is the underlying shared ledger technology powering this solution. And this is especially noteworthy because this institutional banking solution is live today. So with that, I want to mention that this announcement is in fact 3 years in the making. And if you don't believe me, we have a slide to prove it. And let's see, there we go. So Vanessa, let me start with you. Could you tell us a little bit about how this collaboration came about in the first place, and talk to us a little bit about Citi's journey around blockchain?
Sure. Thanks, Adam, and thanks, everyone. It's delightful to be here. As Adam said, things in this kind of space don't happen overnight. They take quite a bit of time. And about 3.5 years ago at Citi, we recognized that blockchain was something that was critical to our industry and something we had to understand much better. It turns out it's very easy to utter the sentence experimenting with blockchain, but actually doing it and developing not only the internal capabilities, which I think many people focus on, but really critically the partnerships with people like Chain and NASDAQ to be able to bring forth to the market solutions that are much more focused on the needs of our clients is something that we've been centered on for the last several years. We do this because blockchain, like many other technologies, we don't believe is something that one can just think about in a conference room or work on your own, right? You've got to have really great connections with the outside. We call this permeability, right? How do you make sure that you're working with great partners and bringing something together? And that has taken us on the journey that you're looking at on this slide, from initially meeting to getting together to try and think about, we've got this new technology. What's the need in the marketplace? What's the place that we want to take this that will actually deliver value? And at Citi, we've got a number of different aspects of how we bring these things together, just to share and give you a little context for what you're looking at. At Citi Ventures, we not only take equity stakes in young companies like Adam's company to help them to scale effectively and efficiently as they grow their companies, but we also work very closely with our businesses and our innovation labs so that the focus isn't just on finding the companies, but really shepherding them through this long journey. And I think when I was at this conference speaking a couple years ago, there's so much excitement, but many of the things that you see when a technology is new, they come out and they're sort of like stars, right? It's like they come out and then they fade. And the thing that we were looking for, that we found in the partnership with NASDAQ and with Chain, was a long-term, solid kind of thing that is growing. And that's important, because the kind of work that's going to be described to you today is a work that takes a long time to build, not only the technical pieces of it, but the partnership and the trust, and making sure that we've got a relationship where we know we can continue to build something going forward. So I know we'll get into it up here, but I think it's been a real pleasure working with all the folks who are on this stage, and we're excited about it. So appreciate you being here.
Great. So Brad, you're the CTO and CIO of NASDAQ. NASDAQ is known as one of the leading innovators in capital markets. Trading businesses have been machine to machine for a long time. As you started to look at the blockchain space in particular, what did you see that drove you to be an early mover to actually bring something like this to production?
Yeah, so I think it started, I've been at NASDAQ a little over 4 years. It started, I think, one of my first days when, like for many of you, you've got some very talented engineers that say, what do you think about Bitcoin?
Right.
And that's where it starts, the journey. And then as you peel it back, and as I got to know NASDAQ's capabilities and our business opportunities, as you all know from the history of NASDAQ's participation in this, we got more enamored and interested in blockchain, and just what Bitcoin was, such a robust and global system without any central management. It opened everyone's eyes to the benefits of a distributed system, a record-keeping system that could be shared. And I think Arvind set it up very nicely, saying between organizations, this offers a lot of opportunity. We build solutions for capital markets customers, a more traditional way where we deliver the full solution. But when you think about when you have to cross an organizational line, it calls for a different way of working. So you'll hear a little bit about that new way of working when you start to center it around this integration capability. So what we did, though, first off, is we said, let's pick something where we can get more experience, where we have complete control. And that's why we were machine to machine in the public market. But as you looked at our small business in the private space, that was one that we could look at. We had full control of the tech stack, and we built Link. And that was our announcement initially, was Link, because we had full control. We didn't have to rely on the complexities of other parties, even though we knew long-term the benefits really came when you added in those other parties. So we built Link. At the same time, we were building our NASDAQ platform that we deliver, kind of our next-gen platform that we deliver to other exchanges. And there we said we should absolutely have a record-keeping system that is future forward, and we built in blockchain service there. We believe that it's early days, so we don't want to necessarily bet on one. We are going to support multiple. And so NASDAQ Financial Framework and the Link platform have come together, and we now look at Link as an innovation platform. And that was by having Link available to us when we started to work with Citi. We had the ability to iterate and prototype and move very fast. So I think some of this is talking about having a large organization that has an innovation initiative, has a view of investing in new technologies like you do. And then when you come together, having something concrete that you can work on. And I think you offered us a tremendous innovation platform coupled with Link. And then that spurred the ideas for the new services that ultimately came about between the two of us, or between the three of us.
Yeah. So let's talk about the solution itself. I think that sets the stage really well. And let me turn now to Morgan and Nelson. So Morgan, to start with you, first of all, why did Citi select this opportunity with NASDAQ as the first use case for Citi Connect for blockchain? And maybe you could also talk a little bit about how you built it and what it does, and over time, what it means for Citi.
Great. So thanks, Adam. I think from a business perspective, my prior role was managing Citi's cross-border payments business. And there was Bitcoin out there, right? The first proven case of cross-border payments on a blockchain. And so we assessed from a business perspective, can we use blockchain to improve our products? And we basically started thinking about that. And then we brought Chain into our innovation lab, and they developed a mini prototype to showcase what blockchain could do. And we said, wow. That helped translate the theoretical thinking to actually the practical and application of blockchain. So that gave us the encouragement to say, okay, what's our best commercial use case? And we evaluated our use case selection and how we chose to work with NASDAQ on 3 dimensions. The first was it solving a true customer pain point? You know, blockchain is so nascent, we didn't want to be experimenting in a place that didn't solve a key problem for a customer. The second was the strategic opportunities that this first step would take us. Did we see roads to extend it? Could we learn something quite useful for our business? And the third very important lens of use case assessment was feasibility. Could we launch this thing within a year? We did not want to be in a space where we're trying to boil the ocean. The technology is too new. You have to walk in blockchain before you run. And so we said, we need to do something we could launch within a year. So of the 6 use cases we evaluated internally, NASDAQ catapulted up to the top because it was really meeting all of those 3 dimensions. And Nelson will talk about the customer pain point in more detail, but we felt pretty confident this would solve a problem for NASDAQ. And given NASDAQ's focus on leveraging blockchain technology, we knew it would be quite strategic and eventually commercial and feasible. NASDAQ was well advanced in the space and already had Link stood up. So that was why we chose to work with NASDAQ. And the second then is how. How did we build this thing? And this was true co-collaboration. So we had the 3 parties. We kicked it off at a workshop in April, a year ago, basically, to think about the solution. And we had weekly design sprints of the 3 organizations for months to design the solution. That created the proof of concept. It actually worked. And then Citi gave the green light to launch it into production because we'd met these hurdles of commercial viability, regulatory and legal feasibility, technical feasibility, and then the strategic importance. So what actually did we build? So if we can go to the next slide. I think if we think about it, from an innovation lens, Citi thinks about innovation as a bridge to the horizon. And what we're really excited that we've launched with NASDAQ is a bridge to the blockchain horizon. So on the left, you have NASDAQ Link blockchain, right? That's the new. In the middle there, you see Citi Connect for blockchain. That is the bridge. That Citi Connect is our branded suite of connectivity solutions for clients, whether clients send us files, they send us instructions via our online banking platform, Swift messages. This is our 4th mode of connectivity, and it connects to NASDAQ's Link blockchain system. And then on the right is our existing payment solutions, WorldLink, our flagship cross-border payments capability, and Citi's accounts that we keep on behalf of our clients. So it really is a bridge between the new and then the existing financial infrastructure that Citi has. So in terms of what it means for Citi, if we think about blockchain enables the transfer of all kinds of assets, right? That's its core sort of selling point, and whether those are digital assets or physical assets, titles to physical assets. And when you think about that, the aha for us was this basically enables participants in these new systems to get cold, hard cash at the end of the day in their bank account. So Citi didn't pick to build a killer blockchain app, right? That is very hard work to build a true ecosystem. What we did is build the bridge to any future blockchain system, starting with NASDAQ's, and really quite excited because we think it's quite extensible and places Citi quite in the flagship space of digital payments.
Thank you, Morgan. So Nelson, you're the client, in this sense, to Citi, to Morgan, and help us understand where you're deploying the technology within NASDAQ specifically, and why you're choosing to use this technology and this approach over other kind of competing payment systems. Like, what was it about this kind of blockchain network that was the aha moment where you realized this solves a pain point for your corporate clients?
Great, yeah, so the NASDAQ private market, to take a real quick step back, something we launched about 4 years ago, and the main purpose is to solve a private company pain point today, most prevalent in larger growth-oriented private companies. And what they're looking to do is provide liquidity to usually their employee base, early investors, or senior management. And if you think about the transactions that we run today, it's much more akin to a real estate transaction than an E-Trade transaction, for example. So we had designed over a course of a few years a workflow solution that was geared to solving what was a very manual-oriented process that was rife with a lot of risk. Compliance needed to be top of mind, and it was, again, a very big challenge for these larger cap private companies. one of those key components in there that's a top pain point today is the payment process. So what these transactions involve would typically be 1 or 2, 3 buyers and hundreds or thousands of sellers, and they're global in nature. So, and typically we'll be moving between, let's say, a small transaction would be $50 million, a large transaction could be upwards of $250 million, and a lot of these payments can be anywhere from millions of dollars down to $10,000. So the complexity of that payment component is certainly there, and it's a very manual-oriented process internally inside of NASDAQ, and has to have a lot of file sharing and things, or is not very elegant. So when we looked at this, the blockchain solution and the opportunity, why we identified the private market initially as a great use case is it's also a low velocity transaction. So if you think NASDAQ, for the public space, we're moving transactions in microseconds. This is not microseconds, this is days, this is weeks. So it was a perfect solution to experiment with blockchain. And then when we partnered up through Citi, through Audio Labs and the work we're doing with Chain already, I think very quickly we saw that Citi was willing to look at it as a client approach. What is the pain point? How does their workflow happen today? And how can blockchain really solve the pain point of you need an ease of transaction, you need to reduce the risk, and you need to have it be something you can track very easily and complete these transactions quickly. So we're incredibly excited about it. I think when we talk to the clients about it, it's going to be a fantastic solution. Thanks,
Nelson. So switching gears for a minute to something I think a lot of folks in the audience are probably wondering. The context for a blockchain is that it's a shared ledger that facilitates asset movement across organizations. And once you stand that up, there are huge efficiency gains. But getting that stood up requires actually collaborating across organizations to begin with, just to build something as straightforward as this with 3 different parties. So I think folks in the audience who are working on these projects, contemplating working on these projects, could benefit from hearing a few words from each of you about what it actually took to get here. And maybe we'll come back this way. So Morgan, maybe a few words from you, and then we'll work up the panel this way.
Sure. I think the first point is there was already connectivity between the 3 organizations through our work together with IDEO Labs, NASDAQ's collaboration with Chain to build Link, et cetera. So there was a shared interest and shared knowledge amongst the 3 parties. That's quite important. We weren't starting from scratch. That's the first point. I think the second point was that it was anchored from the very, very beginning with the client pain point. That was emerged immediately when we were speaking with NASDAQ. And that gave a lot of confidence in building the solution. So it was created for NASDAQ with NASDAQ, and that was quite important. Then I think as we stand back, I think we really have forged a new innovation model. When you think about blockchain, it does have a shared stack, right? And so the concept is, how do you work across organizations? And I'd say it was notable for 3 main reasons. The first is this deep co-innovation with clients. I think Citi always partners with its clients. We test our solutions with clients. But the concept of co-creation of a solution is relatively new, so that's the first. The second is how a large financial institution, such as Citi and NASDAQ, work with a fintech born in 2014. And so really, how do you work well with fintechs? And I think banks and financial institutions are still relatively early in that space in terms of learning. And then the third is to really bring this into production, to make it launched. We've actually completed payment transactions already. It really took a lot of internal collaboration in 2 dimensions. The first is we actually had to have our functional partners, key functional partners, co-create the solution. So our head of AML for the business was actually at this first workshop with NASDAQ in April a year ago. We brought our lawyers in on literally day 2, the next day, and to really start thinking through what are the legal and regulatory potential impacts, and how can we design a solution with regulatory and legal feasibility. We even partnered with an external law firm with expertise in this space as well. And then the third is when we got to the live production green light, we had to work with all kinds of functional partners to get this through Citi in terms of info security, tech testing. That was, I think designing the solution actually was a little bit easier because we had really smart, interesting people, and it still took months. But then actually how you launch this into production required a lot of collaboration across all of our functional partners at Citi. So we're really excited about this new innovation model and think it lends its way to future collaborations as well, and a lot of learnings there.
Brad, anything to add on what it felt like from the NASDAQ side, being NASDAQ's leader in the innovation and technology space?
Yeah, I think the big difference is you see we've got business partners and business owners of a function. That's key. It wasn't driven out of the technology organization for technology's sake. So that was important. And I think if we had gotten down the path with a working system and then tried to back into the legal and the business justification, it would have, a lot of technology projects die that way because someone goes, well, you didn't build exactly what I wanted, and I didn't go on the journey with you on the different paths you took. I think having the business partners there to follow the full journey, so when you're at the end, it is what people want. That's key. And then the other is you traditionally will have one organization take the lead just from the technology standpoint, and you'll build something that looks like a shareable database or an API that someone can hit. So I think we truly have looked at how do you integrate across organizations in a different way, and that's really, I think, what all this is about. Is we're all excited about a different way to build financial infrastructure. We're still learning what that really means, but rather than do it the old standard way, and you would end up then with someone like Citi and NASDAQ, we would have been in a wrestling match for who had access to that database, whether it was a shared database, where do you put it, who's center, and then you would have a real tough time of designing it so that others could join. So I think what we see is the extensibility of this. You don't just build a bilateral solution, you build something that looks more like an extensible network node. So that's what we're excited about. While the last piece I'll say is if we had 10 entities in here, trying to all do this with all the business partners, all the legal requirements, all the security reviews. So that's the other thing to caution, don't try and build the network from day one.
Right.
I think the network comes later.
It feels like this is really a minimum viable ecosystem that we've built here, and that can sort of grow outwards from there. There's certainly other approaches of trying to get everyone at the beginning and then move together lockstep, two different approaches. Why has this one been successful for NASDAQ? Or Citi?
Well, I think one thing, I would add, I think the extensibility is on multiple dimensions, right? We were quite convinced that NASDAQ will extend the solution, right, as it thinks about future opportunities. So that's one extensibility.
Right.
The second is, again, in working with Chain, we think this bridge, right, to blockchain systems, we've built it to be adaptable, to connect into other future blockchain systems that Chain is working with, for example, or other potential blockchain platforms, right? So the idea is this bridge, make it extensible in to many different types of blockchain platforms in the future, but you need to start with a core application here.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah,
So-
when we identified the project, although the private market for us on the corporate side is relatively small today, we've got much larger plans in the private space, but also saw applicability in payments for other parts of NASDAQ. So when we looked at the project, we could have done other projects. This was one that stood out to us as being applicable across the organization at some point.
But suffice it to say, without starting, harder to see how you extend. Because you can get lost with all the complexity.
Absolutely.
Vanessa, coming back to you, in addition to your responsibilities within Citi, you lead Citi Ventures. And there are probably others working in corporate venture groups or bank venture innovation groups. And oftentimes it seems like projects that start in a ventures area or innovation area die. They don't actually get over the sort of chasm, if you will, into the core business. How have you designed and thought about Citi Ventures so that this project could actually end up with Morgan and be here today announcing it? What was the design or trick or just hard work that it takes to make that happen?
So in addition to tenacity, I think, we're headquartered out in the Bay Area and just down the street from Chain. And one of the things that we focus on at Citi Ventures is how is it that young companies are able to come up with these new ideas and scale so rapidly and quickly? And one thing that we've observed over the years, excuse me, is that there's a lot of productive collisions that happen in Silicon Valley. Different people coming together with very diverse perspectives who can take something from an idea, which is nice, to something in production. Sorry, I've caught my 4-year-old's cold. And so what we really found is that if you can bring people together in this productive way, right? Not just, oh, we're going to go off and build it by ourselves. We've all been down that path and it doesn't really work. And not 100 people, but how do you bring a set of people in with a very diverse view of what's the issue, what are we trying to solve for, how do we move that forward? And we do that at Ventures just within our group by saying it's not just about the investment, it's not just about doing something in an innovation lab, it's really about having deep core partnerships with our business so that we can incubate things, we can test them, we can design them, but we can do it in that kind of partnership that says, ultimately, we don't want to be building for building's sake. We want to be building to solve an issue that our clients have. And I think an example like this with NASDAQ and with the help of Chain really illustrates how important it is to have different elements come together to make something happen. I think that's true always. It's even more true with a technology like blockchain, where, as Brad mentioned earlier, it's a network. So us sitting in a conference room trying to think about what would work so well doesn't make any difference. You've got to figure out, I love the notion of minimum viable ecosystem, right? Everyone is used to minimum viable product. How do you export that same kind of thinking to something that is going to require multiple players? And in that requirement, introduces a lot of human complexity that layers on top of the technical complexity. So it's something that we've been focused on for a long time, and I think it always takes great partners to make it happen, but something that I think increasingly incumbents will turn to, because those kinds of partnerships and that kind of experimentation or co-creation, I think, is really the only way that you can keep up with the velocity of change that we're seeing in the environment today. You can't do it in a conference room on your own. You've got to do it bonded together with a group of people who are not necessarily like-minded, who have different points of view on the problem, but are aiming to get to the solution that alleviates that pain point.
Terrific. So as we wind down, let me say thank you to the very large teams behind each of us, from the Chain side, the Citi side, and the NASDAQ side. There are so many incredibly bright, thoughtful, and hardworking people that made this possible. So for those of you in the audience, thank you, and those of you that'll see this later, thank you. And finally, can you take a message? Thank you. Let me thank once more Vanessa, Brad, Morgan, and Nelson, and everyone here, and the Consensus Conference for having us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.